Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm PoK Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. You know what they say about loans? A small loan makes a debt, a big one an enemy. And this explains why China is emerging as global villain number one. It has buried countries under loans. There are some in India's neighborhood. Sri Lanka is one. Their Prime Minister says the economy has collapsed. Nepal is struggling. And Pakistan is as good as a Chinese colony now. They're getting another loan worth $2.3 billion. Tonight we want to tell you why this should bother India. Chinese debt bombs create instability in India's neighborhood. But in the case of Pakistan, the threat is bigger. It may have repercussions on India's sovereignty. You may have heard about Hambantota, the port that Sri Lanka had to give up to China when they could not repay loans. What will Pakistan have to give up when it's unable to pay loans? A new report says it could be parts of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. On Gravitas, we'll bring you the details, what it means for India and why the possibility cannot be ruled out. Also on the show, the Brics leaders held a virtual summit today. India, Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa. The one place where Putin is not a pariah. He attended it. We'll tell you what they said and why it was a balancing act for India. Have you heard of sudden deaths long after COVID? Have you heard of lingering health problems? It's long COVID and more. We'll discuss how the Wuhan virus changes your body and what you need to watch out for. Russia has cut off gas to Europe. Germany has declared an energy crisis. We'll bring you the latest. And Samsung has been fined in Australia for misleading phone ads. We tell you how this practice is rampant, how ads lie and often get away with it. We start with a story from Pakistan. Now, Chinese loans, we know, threaten a nation's sovereignty. They leave countries bankrupt. Look at Sri Lanka. Their economy has collapsed. Pakistan could be next. They're neck deep in Chinese debt and they're sinking further. Pakistan is taking another big loan from China. What if we told you that this loan spells more trouble for India? And I'll explain how that does. First, the background. Pakistan is running out of foreign reserves. It needs money to stay afloat. So the Chinese cash may look like a lifesaver, except that it's not. Look at the trade-off. More compromises, more Chinese demands. Pakistan may even have to give up key assets to China if it fails to repay these loans. What kind of assets? What can and will Pakistan give up? According to one report, Gilgit-Baltistan. That's what the report says, that Pakistan could lease Gilgit-Baltistan to settle Chinese debts. Is that even possible? This is Indian territory occupied by Pakistan. Can they lease it to China? How will India see this move? That's what we'll discuss in the next few minutes. First, let's tell you about the loan, the latest one. The new Chinese loan to Pakistan, it's worth $2.3 billion. Pakistan will get this money in a couple of days. From whom? A consortium of Chinese banks. They are giving this loan. And Pakistan desperately needs this money. It's broke. Foreign reserves dropped below $9 billion this month, so they have money to last only 2 months. China has come to their rescue. Pakistan is also seeking money from the IMF, their 22nd bailout, worth $6 billion. But to get this money from IMF, Pakistan will have to fulfill some big demands that the International Monetary Fund has made. And these are tough demands. Number one, Pakistan must share a detailed spending plan for CPEC, that's the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And number two, Pakistan must give guarantees that IMF money is not used to repay Chinese debt. The idea is clear. Do not spend this money on China, on Chinese projects, on Chinese loans, anything related to China. Why does the IMF need such assurances? Because it knows that China has trapped Pakistan. The debt levels are way too high. Look at the data from their latest economic survey. Pakistan's total debt stands at around $88 billion. How much of this is Chinese debt? $14.5 billion. China is Pakistan's largest bilateral creditor. And this number, $14.5 billion, does not cover China's loans to Pakistan. You see, China has lent to Pakistan through other means too. For instance, Pakistan has borrowed money from Chinese banks. How much? Almost $9 billion. And this money is owed to 3 Chinese commercial banks, the Bank of China, ICBC, and the China Development Bank. And all of them, all these 3, happen to be owned by the Chinese state. Then there's something called SAFE, the State Administration of Foreign Exchange, SAFE. This is a Chinese government agency. It manages China's foreign reserves. SAFE has given loans to Pakistan too. How much? At least $7 billion. So how much does Pakistan really owe China? It's hard to give an accurate figure because money flows through many channels and a lot of it is not transparent. But there are some estimates. Pakistan owes more than $24 billion to China. That's almost 30% of Pakistan's total external debt. 24 billion. And now it is borrowing another $2.3 billion. How will they repay these loans? The IMF won't lend them to repay Chinese loans, and China won't leave them. So how will Pakistan meet its debt obligations? It may have to give up assets, like ceding control of parts of Gilgit-Baltistan. And we are not the ones saying it. This has come from Mumtaz Nagri. He's the chairman of the Karakoram National Movement. It's a local anti-Pakistan group. Now, Nagri says Pakistan could pay off its debt by leasing out Gilgit-Baltistan to China. We haven't been able to independently verify these reports. But if Pakistan does something like this, it is going to be a grave provocation because Gilgit-Baltistan is part of India. And China has repeatedly violated India's sovereignty here with Pakistan's help. China is exploiting Gilgit-Baltistan. It is their gateway to PoK, the showpiece project of the Belt and Road Initiative, PoK, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Since 2018, the local population has feared that China wants to grab their land. That's when Pakistan took over 500 acres of land in 2018. Again, this was done in the name of PoK. What was this land to be used for? A special economic zone, SEZ, to be built by China. Now, the fear is that this zone could be turned into a Chinese colony. The Pakistani army wants to build checkpoints here to guard Chinese investments. The territory was cleared out for China. Thousands of locals were displaced because of this SEZ. Pakistan did not even care to rehabilitate them. The construction of the special economic zone began in 2019. The project is moving at breakneck speed. The last update came in April this year. Pakistani authorities said the SEZ could be operationalized earlier than planned. Again, these projects are being built with Chinese loans, which brings us back to the question, what will happen when Pakistan fails to repay China? Could be a repeat of Sri Lanka. They could not pay Chinese loans. So they had to give up the Hambantota port on a 99-year lease. Pakistan may meet the same fate, giving up control of parts of Gilgit-Baltistan, which is technically a part of India. And that is a threat that Chinese loans pose to India. They're not just destabilizing India's neighborhood, they have the potential to challenge India's sovereignty too. And equally consequential Pakistan's internal politics. It has one unwritten rule. If the army dumps you, you leave quietly. You either go into exile or retire from politics or maybe find a hobby. Imran Khan is not doing any of that. Instead, he's challenging the Pakistani army. His broken record is longer than expected. Wednesday was more of the same. Imran Khan attended a so-called seminar in Islamabad. Guess what it's called? Regime Change Conspiracy and Pakistan's Destabilization. That's the seminar. Clearly, Imran Khan is still stuck in the past. The same conspiracy theories, the same baseless allegations. But he is right about one thing. There was a regime change in Islamabad, except it was not orchestrated by the CIA. It was orchestrated by Pakistan's own army. You all know how the story goes. Pakistan's army chief, Qamar Javed Bajwa, is set to retire this year. In most countries, the government would appoint the successor, but not in Pakistan. In Pakistan, the deep state chooses the army chief. But Imran Khan had other plans. He had his own man inside the army, former ISI chief Faiz Hamid. He is now serving as the Peshawar Corps commander. To stop Imran Khan from appointing him, the army is said to have organized this coup, bloodless, non-violent, and on the face of it, even democratic. Imran Khan himself admits this was the case. He says the establishment feared that he would appoint Faiz Hamid, that a new army chief would expose their corruption. Listen to this.
ये जो इनकी अपने ज़हन में खौफ आ गया था कि जनाब मैं वो जनरल फैज को लाना चाहता हूं, ये इनके खौफ थे। इनके ऊपर खौफ तारी हुआ है क्योंकि चोरी, इतनी ज्यादा चोरी जब कर लें, बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स इनके बाहर पड़े, तो इनको खौफ है उसका। उस खौफ की वजह से ये पैनिक कर रहे थे कि ओहो, ये अगर वो नवंबर के अंदर अपना आर्मी चीफ रख लिया तो ये मुल्क को तबाह हो जाएगा, यानी इनकी फ्यूचर तबाह हो जाएगी।
That's strike one. Strike two is even more serious. Everyone knows the Pakistani army is kingmaker. They appointed Imran Khan. They also appointed Shehbaz Sharif. But you're never supposed to say that out loud. In Pakistan, you pretend that the army is neutral, that the generals are apolitical. But looks like Imran Khan's party did not get the memo. Do you remember Fawad Chaudhry? He was Imran Khan's information minister, a walking cocktail of gaffes and goof-ups. This week, he dropped another pearl. Fawad Chaudhry openly called the Pakistani army a political actor.
जो 70-75 साल की जो तारीख है, उसमें फौजी दोनों पॉलिटिकल प्लेयर है। ये ऐसे ही हम कहें कि नहीं पॉलिटिकल प्लेयर अलहदाबाद जेल फैलाने के लिए हम कहना शुरू कर दें, मतलब जुल्फकार अली भुट्टो जैसे शख्स को फांसी लगा दी इन्होंने। ये तो जुल्म, मजाक थोड़ी है इन्होंने जो किया।
Two possibilities here. One, this is Fawad Chaudhry being Fawad Chaudhry, a loose cannon. Or two, Imran Khan is officially training his guns on the army, which brings us to the third strike, a digital assault. Imran Khan has more than 17 million followers on Twitter. His party, the PTI, has more than 7 million. Put together, it's a strong digital army. And that digital army is taking on Pakistan's real army. How? Through trolls and memes. Let me show you some of them. This meme shows Bajwa riding a bike while Shehbaz Sharif is seated in the sidecar. The caption is even better. It says, the sidecar does not have a handle. Here's another meme. This one shows General Bajwa in a movie poster. And look at the caption. Criminals are back to ruling the country. Let's do one more. This meme shows Bajwa and the two Sharif brothers, Shehbaz and Nawaz. The army chief is carrying both of them in his arms. Now, these are just three examples. Pakistani social media has been flooded with such memes. Bajwa and the army have been mercilessly trolled. Look at the top 3 Twitter trends today. At number 2 is this, hashtag Pakistan under fascism. At number 3, hashtag Bajwa. And this is not normal in Pakistani politics. Criticizing the army is usually a one-way ticket to jail. And guess who brought that law? The same Imran Khan. In February, his cabinet passed a controversial ordinance. If you criticize the army, you get 5 years in jail. This is Imran Khan's gift to Pakistan. Now, this newfound hate for the army is not based on principles. It is based on politics. The question is, how long will Bajwa tolerate it? He let the long march to Islamabad happen. He's letting the online trolls continue. What exactly is he afraid of? Possibly two things. A, Bajwa is nearing the end of his term. He has to think about the civilian life ahead. Any future government could investigate his tenure, his shady dealings as army chief. That's always a fear. And B, the army itself is not united on this. Some senior military commanders are reportedly Imran Khan loyalists. So Bajwa is striking a tough balance here. He has successfully deposed Imran Khan. His next job is exorcising his spirit. And from the looks of it, it's a stubborn one. Speaking of which, here's a multilateral bloc that refuses to fade away. It's called Brics. It is made up of the 5 largest developing economies in the world: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. BRICSA. Brics. Now, this bloc has been written off so many times when Brazil's economy collapsed, when Russia annexed Crimea, when India and China clashed in Galwan. Every time people wrote an obituary for Brics, it kept coming back. Today, the heads of state held a virtual meeting. All 5 leaders were in attendance. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, President Vladimir Putin of Russia, President Xi Jinping of China, President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, and President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. Putin and Xi would have been looking forward to this meeting. For Putin, it's a comeback on the world stage, his first major summit after the invasion. For Xi Jinping, it's another forum to target the West, a chance to unite the developing world and challenge the US. But what about India? Prime Minister Narendra Modi focused on the shared interests. He talked about economic cooperation and post-pandemic recovery.
वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था की गवर्नेंस के बारे में हम ब्रिक्स सदस्य देशों का नजरिया काफी समान रहा है और इसलिए हमारा आपसी सहयोग वैश्विक पोस्ट कोविड रिकवरी में उपयोगी योगदान दे सकता है। पिछले वर्षों में हमने ब्रिक्स में कई संस्थागत सुधार किए हैं जिनसे इस संगठन की प्रभावशीलता बढ़ी है।
Do you see the different expectations? For China and Russia, the BRICS is political. For India, it is financial. Putin has no option but to depend on the BRICS. And these numbers should tell you why. China is buying 55% more Russian oil after the invasion. India is purchasing 25 times more. The BRICS is Putin's best bet against Western sanctions. The only forum where he's not a pariah.
It is important that despite all the problems and difficulties, the BRICS business circles are consistently expanding mutually beneficial ties in trade, financial and investment areas. Thus, the trade turnover of the Russian Federation with the countries of the five in the first 3 months of this year increased by 38%, up to $45 billion.
Both Putin and Xi criticized the West. The Chinese president accused the US of abusing international sanctions. He called for the emerging world to unite against the West. Listen to this.
We must abandon Cold War mentality and block confrontation and oppose unilateral sanctions and the abuse of sanctions. And it's important for the world to recognize that forging a community with a shared future, like a big family, is so much better than building exclusive circles that practice hegemony.
Now, how much of this will make it to the joint statement? That is a big question, because Russia and China may criticize the US, but India does not share that criticism. Reports say India will resist any anti-US campaign within the BRICS. And frankly, it's not a surprise. India's position is that of strategic autonomy. Neither the West nor Russia. At the Quad, India resisted anti-Russia moves. At the BRICS, India may resist anti-US moves. But where does that leave the grouping? In a lot of uncertainty. There is very little in common between these five countries. Their people are different. Their economies are different. In fact, the BRICS has been bunched under a very arbitrary tag. Developing countries. Does Russia really fit in that description? Or modern-day China? The fact is, the BRICS was seduced by its own scope. They make up 41% of the global population, 24% of the world GDP, 16% of global trade. Impressive numbers, but do numbers really make effective blocks? Compare that to the G7 or even the Quad. They're much more relevant because there is political alignment. There is a common vision. The BRICS does not have something similar. India expected it to be the voice of the developing world, but clearly that's not happening. Putin sees the BRICS as a lucrative market. China sees it as another anti-US forum, which is why they want to expand it. China is the chair, the BRICS chair for 2022. They have announced plans to admit like-minded partners into this grouping, and they have the clout to do so. China makes up 70% of the BRICS' total GDP. The question is, how do they keep India interested? If India does not go all along, BRICS loses all relevance. So Beijing is trying very hard to woo India. On Wednesday, Foreign Minister Wang Yi met India's ambassador to China. Let me tell you what he told the Indian envoy, and I'm quoting. This is the Chinese leader. China and India should support rather than undermine each other, strengthen cooperation rather than guard against each other, and enhance mutual trust rather than be suspicious of each other. Wang Yi says the common interests outweigh the differences. And this is not the first time. In March this year, Wang Yi visited India. He tried to push New Delhi beyond the border row in Ladakh. So clearly China wants cooperation. But India must respond with caution. Because this outreach is not about building ties with India. It's about achieving China's own goals. And in that context, Prime Minister Modi's Brics address makes perfect sense. Vaccines, economy, climate change, yoga. Not a single word about political commitments. So India, they're trying a difficult balancing act. It wants to maintain diplomatic and economic ties with both Russia and the West. And I don't need to tell you why. These two sides don't see eye to eye these days. They're engaged in a bitter battle over Ukraine. This week, Russia escalated that fight. Moscow is now waging an economic war on Europe. Its weapon are its gas supplies. Since last week, Moscow has cut supplies to Europe by more than 50%. The result is this: gas prices have shot up. In 2 weeks, they've increased by more than 60%. What does the Kremlin hope to achieve with these cuts? And how do European countries respond to this? Our next report has some answers. Russia is waging a war on two fronts. Russian troops are fighting the Ukrainian forces, while the Russian government is locked in a battle with the West. Last week, Moscow opened a new front against the Western powers. Gas supplies to Europe are dwindling. In 1 week, Russia has cut supplies by 60%. A host of European countries are affected. At least 12 European countries say their supply has been cut. The European Union smells a Russian conspiracy.
Russia has weaponized energy, and we have seen further gas disruptions announced in recent days. All this is part of Russia's strategy to undermine our unity. In total, 12 member states are now affected by Russian unilateral supply cuts. 10 member states have issued an early warning under the gas security of supply regulation.
Russia has rejected this charge. Russian energy giant Gazprom supplies gas to Europe. This company claims it is facing some technical issues. Gazprom says it needs a turbine to supply gas. The equipment is manufactured in Canada. Before the war, Gazprom had sent the turbine to Montreal for maintenance. But now the company is struggling to get it back, thanks to Western sanctions, it says. So gas exports have taken a hit. Moscow says it is now getting help from Berlin to restore supply.
Our German counterparts know perfectly well all the technological cycles of oil and gas pipeline maintenance. They know it perfectly well. It has been working for many years already. It has been working properly, seamlessly. Therefore, it is strange to bring politics into it.
Not everyone is buying Russia's arguments, though. The German Vice-Chancellor says the supply cuts are a political move. Italy was more harsh in its criticism. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi says Russia is lying. Before the Ukraine war, Russia supplied 40% of Europe's gas. A network of pipelines has allowed Russia to build this market dominance. Europeans get Russian gas from 3 pipelines, and this infrastructure cannot be replaced overnight. Russia's decision to slash exports could be driven by 3 reasons. Number 1, it could be punishment for supporting Ukraine. Number 2, Moscow wants to build pressure on the West to force it to ease some of the sanctions. And number 3, prevent Europe from storing enough gas to last till winter. Currently, Europe's underground storage caverns are 57% full. The European Commission wants each country to take its reserves to up to 80% by November. Without Russian supplies, European states might struggle to get there. Germany has already declared a gas alert.
Gas is a scarce commodity in Germany from now on. I say that although or precisely because the security of supply in Germany is currently guaranteed, so the market is able to provide the quantities that are needed to ensure security of supply in Germany and also to fill the storage facilities moderately.
Gas prices are already shooting up. In 2 weeks, they've increased by 60%. The European Union wanted to punish Russia for the war in Ukraine, but its sanctions have boomeranged. Bureau Report, WION World is One. Experts say there are 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The journey from denial to acceptance can be a long one, especially if your loss is immense. In 2020, Argentina went through something similar. Their star footballer, Diego Maradona, passed away. He was 60 years old. He was recovering from a brain surgery. not to mention decades of drug addiction. His body was not holding well. He had liver, kidney and cardiovascular disorders, yet his death has become a major controversy. The autopsy was normal, the treatment was in order, but Maradona's family was not convinced. They accused his personal doctors of negligence, of not doing enough to save his life. This week, the matter reached court. Public prosecutors demanded a criminal trial against the doctors, and guess what? The judge accepted. All 8 doctors will stand trial for culpable homicide. If found guilty, they face up to 25 years in jail. 25 years. The trial date is yet to be decided, but chances are it will drag on to 2023 or 24. Now, I know this is a sensitive issue for Argentina because Maradona is not just any other athlete. He is worshipped as a god in the footballing world. But is that blind respect clouding Argentina's judgment? And here's why I ask. The family blames his personal doctors. The personal doctors blame the hospital. The nurses blame the doctors and the lawyers blame the ambulance service. It's almost an endless cycle of charges and countercharges. It's impossible to say who is being honest. And amid all this pressure, Argentina formed a special medical board to investigate Maradona's death. What did they find? That more could have been done, that Maradona would have been better off in a proper medical facility. When he died, he was in a rented house. Does this mean the doctors are guilty? Well, we leave that to the judges. But here's some interesting information I would like to share. Among the 8 doctors, one is a psychologist. He too is charged with homicide. How can a psychologist be implicated in a heart attack? Last we checked, psychologists deal with the mental state. Heart attacks are cardiovascular. So many questions are yet to be answered in this case, like what role is the Argentinian government playing? After all, these are tough times to stay popular. Inflation is more than 61% in Argentina. More than 40% of the people live in poverty, and the Wuhan virus pandemic has left a lasting impact. More than 9 million cases, around 130,000 people dead. What's more, elections are due next year. And these are tough times for any government. It's easy to surrender to populist demands, to find controversies where there may be none. But Argentina as a country must move on. As things stand, the doctors had no motive to kill Maradona or to deny him treatment. Investigating what happened is absolutely fine, but turning it into a spectacle is not. It's a disservice to the legacy of Diego Maradona. On the 11th of March 2020, the Wuhan virus was declared a pandemic. The virus went on to kill 6 million people, infect 538 million others. It is the 23rd of June 2022. The world has moved on. Wuhan virus headlines have been replaced by news of the war in Ukraine. Discussions about the virus have been replaced by discourse about inflation. We've got ourselves jabbed once, twice, thrice, even 4 times in some countries. And we've assumed that the story is over, except that it's not. The curse called COVID lives on. Have you heard of any unexplained death around you? Maybe someone in his early 30s suddenly died of a heart attack, or a completely healthy person suddenly had a stroke. That may be the result of COVID. The Wuhan virus has changed our body in ways we could have never imagined. It has damaged our lungs. It has left our heart weak. If you've had the Wuhan virus, chances are you too may have become more vulnerable to heart problems. A group of researchers recently studied US veterans who had recovered from COVID, and they found that these veterans showed a stark increase in 20 cardiovascular problems, 20 heart problems. They were 72% more likely to have heart failures compared to those who did not have COVID. They were also 52% more likely to have a stroke. This is just one of the many ways in which the Wuhan virus continues to hurt our body. Here's another. It's called long COVID. 1 in 5 adults who had COVID has symptoms of long COVID. Children who've had COVID have symptoms running into 2 months. These are the findings of 2 studies. The first one was conducted in the US, the second one in Denmark. The first one surveyed adults. The second one, 44,000 children. Both were published separately by different groups of researchers. Together, they reflect a global problem. Long COVID and the impact of COVID is universal and age neutral. Like the virus, its legacy too is affecting people across the globe. If we are to consider the 1 in 5 ratio, it means a fifth of the 538 million people who were infected are today suffering from long COVID. 1/5 of them. That's more than 100 million people. 100 million people living with Wuhan virus-related health complications. Do you see the scale of it? It's a new pandemic in itself. The question is, are you a victim? Are you suffering from long COVID or COVID-related complications? What kind of risks do you face? Let's start with the symptoms. Fatigue, rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, cognitive difficulties like difficulty in remembering things or learning new things or paying attention. Symptoms also include muscle weakness, chronic pain. Quick disclaimer, these are the common symptoms. You may be displaying some completely different symptoms like nausea or stomach pain. We spoke to some medical experts before putting this story together for you, and they said that in some cases, long COVID is being accompanied by gastritis. And that's another problem you need to watch out for. The point is, long COVID has different symptoms in different people. They also differ with age. For example, in children aged 0 to 3, the most common symptoms are mood swings, rashes, and stomach aches. In children aged 12 to 14, the most common symptoms are fatigue, mood swings, trouble remembering or concentrating. Now, these symptoms, COVID-related symptoms, are not supposed to last beyond 3 weeks. So what should you do if you're displaying them even 3 weeks after testing positive? Doctors say 90% of long COVID cases are mild and they can be taken care of at home. Now, what qualifies as mild? Headaches, muscle aches, acidity. Doctors say those suffering from these symptoms must eat protein-rich diets, drink a lot of fluid. In most cases, the symptoms would go away. If they persist, see a doctor. So that's the 90% mild. What about the remaining 10% of long COVID cases? Who falls in this category? Those with chronic cough, breathlessness, palpitation, heart-related problems. Doctors say these cases need immediate attention. You must see your doctor. Chances are you'll be asked to run an X-ray or a CT scan and treat it accordingly. Now, here's something to remember. Don't get yourself tested before you see a doctor. I'm sure you know this. Every ray that passes your body has medical implications. High doses of radiation can damage human cells. It can lead to skin burn, hair loss, make you more vulnerable to cancer. So repeated radiation can do more harm than good. Even if you think you have long COVID, don't run ad hoc tests. Let the doctor decide, and it's important to consult your doctor regularly, even months after COVID. Certain groups are more at risk. The American study found that people in their 20s and 30s are more at risk of long COVID compared to older adults. Women are more likely to have it than men. In the US, for example, 9.4% of the adult women showed symptoms. That's almost a tenth of the adult female population of America. What about men? 5.5% of them had symptoms. So don't take it lightly. Now, you know the symptoms. You also know what to do. If you're showing any of them, you could be anyone. Vaccinated, unvaccinated, smoker, non-smoker, diabetic, cancer survivor. It does not matter what your medical history is. Long COVID or COVID-related complications can affect you regardless. This is the legacy of the Wuhan virus, and we can't afford to ignore it. In the United Kingdom, there's another health scare. A national incident has been declared. It's a health emergency of sorts. This is about the polio virus. It has been detected in sewage samples in London, and this has triggered alarm. The UK has not reported a single polio case in the last 40 years, 40, no polio. So how did this disease re-emerge? How much of a risk does it pose? Has community transmission already begun? And above all, why are Britons blaming Prime Minister Boris Johnson for what has happened? Here's a report.
The United Kingdom is on the edge. An old disease has made a comeback. One that had been eradicated long ago, the polio virus. It has been detected in London's sewage system. The discovery is cause for concern. The UK reported its last case of natural polio in 1984. By 2003, it had officially eradicated this crippling disease. 19 years later, there are fears it may have returned. Here's what we know so far. In recent months, the polio virus has been found in sewage samples in London. The detection was not a one-off incident. Infected samples were found on several occasions. Authorities say it is likely that the samples are from North and East London. So far, no associated cases of paralysis have been reported, but investigations will aim to establish if community transmission is occurring. If confirmed, the UK's National Health Service will be asked to get children under 5 vaccinated for the virus. So how much of a risk does this discovery pose? There's no clarity. The UK's Health Security Agency says the samples could belong to overseas individuals on a visit to London. But the fact that the virus has been detected repeatedly is alarming. Authorities insist the overall risk to the public is extremely low. They say a majority of Londoners are fully vaccinated against polio. It doesn't help that since 2004, the UK has been using an inactivated version of the polio vaccine, one that produces a weaker response than live pathogens. To put it simply, there is no guarantee if community transmission of polio can be prevented. Experts say no one could have predicted this health risk. No one can be held accountable for it. The citizens of Britain don't agree. They're blaming their Prime Minister and his policies. Like this one, allowing raw sewage to be discharged into English rivers. In 2021, it was discharged over 370,000 times. This happened on Boris Johnson's watch. It's important to note here that if Afghanistan and Pakistan are the only 2 countries where polio still exists, is the United Kingdom set to join that list?
I have a question for you. How many of you have fallen for a false advertisement? Did you ever buy a cream that was promising fairer skin in just 14 days? Did you then religiously apply that cream for 14 days, but on the 15th day, notice no difference? Has this happened to you? And if yes, what did you do next? Did you call the brand and register a complaint? Or did you drag the brand to court? People in Australia did. They dragged Samsung to court. The brand had misled consumers. Samsung had advertised some of its phones as water resistant. The company ran advertisements. They showed that the phones could be used for clicking photos underwater. Basically, they could double up as a GoPro. Except they couldn't. Samsung was lying and people were left with water-damaged phones. So they complained to Australian authorities. Samsung was dragged to court. It was ordered to pay $9.7 million. That is Samsung's fine for misleading ads. Quite a cathartic story, isn't it? It tells you that you should not fall for misleading ads, and if you do, what course of action you can take. In 2021, China fined Sephora, the cosmetic retailer Sephora. It was asked to cough up more than $62,000 for a misleading ad. Sephora was selling a cream that claimed to improve a person's jawline. Have you heard of the shoe brand New Balance? It's quite in vogue these days. Back in 2011, the company was selling something called toning shoes. It said the shoes could increase calorie burn and muscle activation, and that's how the shoes could tone people's legs and buttocks. Obviously, that magical transformation did not happen. 3 American women went on to sue the brand. New Balance was forced to pay $2.3 million, also a $100 refund to anyone who bought a pair. Once Red Bull was sued because it could not give consumers wings, the beverage company had to pay $13 million. So there is precedent. There are also laws in place. They allow you to file a complaint against misleading ads. And this is not just the case in the West. In India, for example, you can register a complaint online. False advertisement falls under the Department of Consumer Affairs, and there is a dedicated page for grievances against misleading advertisements. Yet somehow, false advertising is extremely rampant in India. It will be a crime to not start this story with Fair and Lovely. Nowadays, it goes by the name Glow and Lovely. The cream does not make you glow. And never did it make anyone fairer. Yet it records an annual sale of 2,000 crore rupees. Horlicks is a household name in India. The drink promises to make children taller, stronger, sharper. It dominates India's 7,000 crore plus health drink market. Other players have also been accused of false advertising. Bonvita, for example, it promises to prepare you for a win. Can you drink a cup full of it and still lose a game of football? Very much. Complan's plan is to give you strength. Pediasure claims to be helping your child's brain development. Can a drink do that? Who is verifying these claims? Parents are busy forcing children to guzzle these drinks, and brands are happily getting away with false advertising in a lot of these cases. Some did get into trouble. A toothpaste called Sensodyne promised to give people relief from sensitivity. It did not. The ads went on to show actors in lab coats pretending to be dentists. The brand was pulled up by Indian authorities. So was online leading platform Byju's. It claimed 90% of its subscribers renew their subscription. Ask any Byju's subscriber and you will not know the real story. A Dove shampoo was also pulled up. It promised to reduce hair fall. Apparently it did not. False advertising is like a norm in India. Switch on your television and you will come across a soap commercial promising to make your skin fairer, softer. A Harpic solution promising to kill 99.9% of germs. A Tide detergent promising to clean even to the microscopic levels. A juice promising to be 100% natural. A toothpaste promising to make your teeth whiter in record time. How many of them really work? And how many of these commercials have you fallen prey to? What did you do when you realized that you had been tricked? The problem is we automatically assume that big brands are invincible. Turns out they're not. What happened with Samsung in Australia is a case in point. So that's an option you could explore. Let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Sri Lanka's parliament has cancelled its remaining sittings for the week to save fuel, as the economic crisis rapidly depletes the island nation's already scarce petrol supplies. The governor of Luhansk has said Russian forces are edging closer to seizing Lysychansk as heavy shelling continues to pound Severodonetsk and Lysychansk in the Luhansk region. Britain has introduced a new tranche of trade sanctions against Russia, including prohibitions on the export of a range of goods and technology and the export of jet fuel. The US Supreme Court rules that the Constitution provides a right to carry concealed and loaded handguns in public places, issuing a major decision on the meaning of the Second Amendment. The court ruled 6-3 to strike down a century-old New York state law. Fresh political turmoil in Bulgaria after the coalition government collapsed, losing a vote of no confidence in just 6 months, leading to an increased likelihood of an early general election. Various parts of Ecuador are witnessing violent protests over inflated costs for fuel, food, and other basic commodities. The police authorities in the country had to take strict measures to control large crowds. In China, heavy rains have pushed water levels in the Pearl River Delta to their highest in almost a century. Thousands of people have been evacuated from the worst-hit parts of the region. Firefighters and other personnel have been intervening by land and air to control a wildfire that broke out in a forest in the Marmaris district of southern Turkey. The cause of the fire remains unclear. The PGA Tour has announced a series of measures in an attempt to stop the mass exodus of players towards the LIV Golf Series. Several of the game's big names have joined the Saudi-backed breakaway in recent days. The PGA Tour has increased prize money by $54 million across 8 tournaments. 8 medical personnel will stand trial after being accused of criminal negligence in the death of legendary Argentinian footballer Diego Maradona. A judge has ordered a culpable homicide trial after a medical panel found that there were widespread deficiencies and irregularities in Maradona's treatment.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.
Winston, the French Bulldog, does reserve best.